another episode of Beyond the Smile with Dr. Mark. Mark, welcome again. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So we're coming to the end of summer, believe it or not.
I know.
Crazy. Any plans for the long weekend before school starts and all that fun stuff?
No, I guess it's kind of the calm before the routine, right?
Yeah.
Just enjoy the last little bit of it. Right?
I'm excited
Weather
to do
looks
nothing.
nice, so that's good.
Yeah. I'm excited to do nothing. So today we're going to talk about a day in the life. So we're going to go a little bit behind the curtains and let people know sort of what it looks like behind the scenes at the clinic and what a typical day might look like. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of explore that.
Sure.
So I'm curious as we start, can you walk us through what and I put typical in quotes on my notes because I know there's never a typical day for you, but what does a typical day look like for you? Like from when you arrive at the clinic, like what do you typically do to get yourself ready for the day?
Yeah, so I typically am the first one there.
Okay.
So I show up early and if you had a tracker on me, I will probably take the exact same steps every single time.
Yeah.
Turn on everything, turn on the lights, all that kind of stuff. And then eventually I end up making myself a coffee. And that's when I'll sit down and sort of start looking at the day more intensively and looking for pinch points, opportunities, trouble spots, that kind of stuff from a scheduling standpoint, so that when the team does arrive and we eventually get to chat with one another, then I'm a little in the know.
So how involved are you in do you know your schedule before you show up in the morning, or do you kind of let the team book in and then you kind of see what the day looks like before you get started?
Technically I can.
Right.
Practically, I don't usually. I mean, there are sometimes when there are really big projects or significant undertakings. Those things I'll be aware of, but generally speaking, on the day to day, I'm not too involved in that. And I honestly, for me, if you show up, it's a bit like going back to university, right? If you get your syllabus on day one, and it's like, hey, I've got all these projects, I got super overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
But you have to get through it one thing at a time.
One day at a time.
So for me, I choose to just one day at a time, one client at a time, one interaction at a time. So.
And do you like your schedule a certain way? Like, do you maybe like the harder things towards the end, the morning, or do you care? Like, you just take it as it comes typically?
Typically, we take it as it comes. We do put some thought into how we navigate those things because. There's a couple hygienists that need my attention. There's a couple different treatment rooms that need my attention. So you do have to be mindful about how you do it. Generally, people are a little bit fresher in the morning. So
yeah, fair enough.
We try for that, but we're sensitive to people's schedules as well. So
interesting. And other than making your coffee, do you have any routines you do every morning to get ready for work?
Well, I do have a TV in my office, and the TV in my office is really there for tennis tournaments.
Oh my god!
So right now there happens to be a major tennis tournament on. So I generally will flip that on and have that running in the background. I generally just kind of dig into the day, and that's my sort of intensive look at it. And there's not too much more magic to that, but I am that kind of person who needs a little bit of time in the morning to sort of get my engine running. So I like a little bit of quiet by myself, and then everybody filters in.
Who are you cheering for? Like, who's your tennis?
Well, he actually went out last night. So.
Oh darn! Who's that?
I'm an Alcaraz fan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just because he seems to enjoy himself no matter what's going on, and he's obviously phenomenal. I'm. Live and die by Federer, but he's retired.
Yeah,
so.
Fair enough. From a day-to-day, what do you find yourself doing a lot of? Is there a treatment or something that you're that's sort of outside of the dental, like I'm talking about outside the dental hygienist, like yourself? Is there things that you're doing, do you find on a day-to-day basis all the time with your patients?
Yeah, I mean, we focus a lot on communication, so as you know, my objective always is to elevate people's understanding and knowledge. I think historically the profession's not real great at that, which usually leaves a client in a position where they're maybe out of control, or they don't really know what's going on, and so I'm looking to level that playing
Mm.
field, or bridge that gap. So I I would say I probably talk a lot,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and try to help people understand, and I think that increases not only their level of control but their level of comfort and
Mm.
engagement. You know, Obviously you do lots of fillings, you do lots of
Yeah,
crowns, you
yeah,
do
right,
lots of
right,
all of that kind of stuff,
right.
but the thing that I take the most pride in is that communication, and sort of doing the deeper dive
Right.
into what's really happening.
And do you have, when it comes to communication, I'm sure you do that with your team as well. Do you have morning huddles before everyone gets going, or do you meet with individually with your team before they get going?
Yeah, no, for sure. Every morning we all gather together. Just
Yeah.
it's not an arduous process because everybody basically preps for their particular patients that they're going to take
Right,
care of,
right.
and what we're really looking for is everything scheduled well? Do we think that
Mm.
that's going to come off okay? Are there people that have special particular needs
Right.
or attention, or nervous issues, or in those sort of behind the scenes? How do we navigate or manage our clientele? That's really what we're looking at
Mm.
in those meetings, more than the nuts and bolts of
Right,
here's what we have to do and here's how we're going to do it.
right.
We kind of assume by this point in time that we know how to
How
do
to
that
do
stuff.
that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
So how do you're saying like a couple things out of there. One is if you have a patient that is nervous and you know that ahead of time, like how do you guys deal with that? Like how do you calm someone down, or how does the team do it? Like what are some of the things you guys do?
Yeah. By the time that we're doing something for somebody, we will have had a fair amount of time with them.
Discussion, right,
So I think the first part of being able to calm somebody down is to actually, have built a
right.
relationship.
Right, already with them.
Yeah. So if you can connect on that level,
Mhm.
right, and then of course you do all the normal things like you drop into the nice monotone.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything just becomes a lot more.
Kenny G's playing in the corner.
Well, yeah, maybe just the music, not actually
Yeah.
Kenny G. That would be weird. Yeah, no, of course. So we set
Right.
the scene. I mean, we've got things like blankets, and we have neuroscience products that help people manage their nervous
Yeah,
system.
fair enough.
There are lots of different tips
Right.
and tricks, but the main thing is just to reconnect with them and let them know that we're there for them, and our whole point is to care for them. Shift them into that space, because people, when they show up in the dental office, they're not their true self, and I
Right,
know
fair
that
enough.
just from treating friends.
Right.
They all show up a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah, interesting. You mentioned as well in that answer that your team should know what they're doing. Like you've kind of you're trained, you know what you're going to attack. But how do they stay current? Like do you guys have to always go and do more learning? Do you teach them? Like how does that work from a like
Yeah,
that perspective?
yeah, both are correct,
Right.
right? So, I always say that knowledge that's contained only in your head is
Right.
is pretty useless,
Yeah,
really,
yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah. That's right.
So you want to try to disseminate that across the entire team. So yes, I will absolutely use moments, and try to explain the
Mhm.
things that I see, and I feel like if the team understands more what it is that I'm looking at and how I see things, then they're going to be better
Mhm.
equipped to support that. Now, I obviously don't know everything.
Right.
They don't know everything, and if you feel like you've arrived, maybe it's time to retire. So yes, professionally, we're all required to maintain our licensure through continued learning. So
Interesting.
now you have lots of opportunity in terms
Right.
of what direction you
Right.
take that. What areas fascinate you? What do you want to learn more about?
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a continual process.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. A little bit of side note, and as OpenAI is launching their new ChatGPT shortly, and it's called Strawberry. And the idea behind is that there's a lot of discussion around obviously those models learn from what's out in the internet. It's learning all the stuff that's out there. But there's a concern that eventually it's actually consumed all the knowledge there is to consume.
Right.
So it's now creating synthetic knowledge. It's actually creating new knowledge on its own.
Right.
So because like you said, once you hit, well then how do I learn more?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that just hurts my head thinking about it. It's actually creating its
Yeah.
new knowledge. And I'm like, yeah, so it's interesting.
For me, it's like considering those movies where you've got competing timelines.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, that's right.
and it's like, well, how does that affect the future?
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it
yeah.
totally makes sense, right? I mean, the whole concept of getting to the end of the internet, right?
Yes.
And then now you're like two or three experts deep in terms of interpreting the data and reinterpreting the data.
Yes.
And it's not actually new data. So
interesting. It's crazy. So I'm curious, from a day-to-day perspective, things happen. A patient can't show up. There's an emergency that someone needs to come in. Do you always leave room for that sort of stuff during the day, or how do you handle the sort of unexpected things that come up during the day?
Well, I think anybody who's involved in dentistry learns very quickly that you've got to be adaptive, basically. Mm-hmm. So yes, stuff happens, and you can't plan for that. So you can't plan for the apocalypse all the time.
Sure.
But you learn to triage things, and a lot of times things that are quote unquote emergencies, people are actually just looking for peace of mind. Mm-hmm. So there are very few true emergencies.
Fair enough.
You know, physical trauma for sure
is different. A toothache is not necessarily an emergency all the time.
Correct. Sometimes you can manage that until you can actually set aside the appropriate amount of time to treat it. So we all learn how to triage that stuff. But the true emergencies, we figure out a way to wiggle them in and do what we need to do. And that's really, I guess it's really fostered from the thought process. The way that I look at things, I always want to treat people like I would like to be treated. Right. And I would like to think that if I had an emergency, I would like to have somebody help. Yeah. And so we try to be responsive.
Interesting. So you when you're coaching your team, it's not just how to use the tools, for lack of a better word. Do you coach how to treat patients the way you would like to do it? Like, that's got to be a big part of what you're coaching, right?
I think it's everything, right? And if you think about today's world, right? So whether you're going to a restaurant, a mechanic, a lawyer, right. You have choice.
Yeah.
So the question really becomes, why would somebody choose you versus somebody else, right? And okay, you might have the greatest technology, you might have the newest this, that, the other thing, but you're only going to have that for a hot minute,
right?
Because somebody else is going to come along and then they've got the new thing,
right?
So it's not really about that. And there's a general belief, I think, rightly or wrongly, from the public that all dentists, or dental clinics are the same. Not true. So it really comes down to the people. Those relationships and the way you navigate them.
Interesting. So how would you describe the atmosphere? I don't like the word culture. The atmosphere within the office.
Culture, I think, is a great word.
See, do you? Because I don't know. Okay, let's say culture.
And
how do you describe
it's probably
the culture,
because it's overused.
Maybe. So how do you describe the culture? Like, is it behind the scenes organized chaos running around, but from a front, it looks everything is put together? Like, how do you describe sort of on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in an era where, you're off of the late 80s, 90s kind of thing. And, the answer is always yes. You sweat it behind the,
right.
You do have to have a proactive mindset, a growth mindset, all of those sorts of things. So that's inherently at the core. But what I think really drives it is it's patient centric, and it is win-win, and it's values based. Right. So if you set your values or what it is that the clinic stands for, the way that you want to conduct yourself, then that carries through on all of your relationships. So whether it's the guy dropping off the mail or patient who's coming in to spend a lot of time, effort, energy, and money, it's all the same. Should be all the same, right?
Interesting. Yeah. So do you, like, when you're hiring, I guess, is that and I know we've talked about hiring hygienists is an easy thing right now. It's a difficult hire sometimes.
Correct.
As you go through, like, even if you find a person that checks 9 out of the 10 boxes, and the 10th box you don't think he or she would fit culturally, would you make the decision not to hire the person?
100%. Yeah. Somebody who doesn't fit culturally or doesn't subscribe to the way that we want to treat patients or
Right.
interact with one another. I mean, it's that one rotten apple
Yeah,
spoils the whole
yeah, yeah,
barrel.
yeah, yeah.
And it'll end up costing you so much in the long
In the long
run,
run, yeah.
relationship wise, loss of patience, loss of
Right.
trust. Right, all those things take a long time to build, but they can be torn down pretty darn quickly. So
Fair enough.
yeah,
So
you can teach skills.
yeah,
You
that's what I was
can't
going to
you
say.
can't
That's
teach
the other. Yeah,
people to be
I
good
agree,
people.
100%. Like we used to say that from I come from a service industry, and like you could pretty much teach anybody how to bartend and like it's the personality is hard to teach. You need that, right? The
Of
rest you
course,
can.
of course.
So I'm curious. What's changed for you over the last years when it comes to sort of your approach to day-to-day work? Like, is there new technology or just personal growth or new procedures or things you've learned over the years? Like, wow, I won't be doing that again. Like, we're going to handle things like what are some of the things that come to mind on what's changed for you over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, I mean, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, right?
Yeah.
But time I think is the greatest teacher, right?
Right.
So it's not until you have some perspective and ability to look back at things can you really sort of recognize what works and what doesn't
Right.
work. But the thing that's changed the most for me is just my comfort level with respect to how it is that I think people should be treated, what culture makes the most sense to me, what values I internalize and embody. And when I live in alignment with those things, then generally experience is better,
Right.
life is better.
Right. Right.
Now, from a technical standpoint, yeah, I mean, technology is changing all the time. You got lasers, you got 3D
Yeah.
imaging,
Yeah.
you got all of that stuff, which allows us to understand and see so many more conditions and problems, which allows us to help support people on levels that, quite frankly, when I was going through dental school, had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like no concept of it whatsoever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, last question I had is, you've had a busy day, chaotic. Maybe things haven't gone exactly the way you planned that day. How do you end your day? What's your routine? How do you do you sit down and reflect your day? Do you like, oh, I could have done that better, or do you like, no, I'm just gonna park it and deal with it tomorrow? Like, how do you typically end your day?
Yeah, I mean, I always reflect on the day. So I think it's important to have, healthy level of dissatisfaction
Sure,
with things.
always got to get better, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of one of my core drivers.
Yeah.
After that, and you decide to park the day,
Right.
right? Which is a good thing. It's
Yeah,
a healthy
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
I think. For me, there's always movement. So that can be as simple as going to walk the dog. It can be going to play tennis. It can
Right.
be going for a bike ride. It can be doing a workout. It can be anything, but there is some movement.
Some sort of movement.
Movement for me always has been kind of like my sort of Zen church meditation place.
Yeah.
And, I get to lose myself in that. So that, for me, that's a healthy habit.
And how often I said it was the last question, but I have one more on it. So how often, so the next morning when you have so something good or bad happens, it doesn't have to be negative, in your next morning huddle, does that get brought up there?
It can. I'm trying to be better at communicating those things in the moments or closer to.
Yeah, fair enough.
I find that that's sometimes the best place to do that learning.
Yeah.
If you allow too much distance between the event, I think stuff gets lost in the translation and the nuance gets slipped. But of course, if it's procedural, what I tell my team is like, okay, listen here, I'm the coach. Okay, so I've decided that we are a basketball team. We're not a soccer team. So here's kind of loosely the rules. Here's the objectives, right? Now, I'm not going to tell you that you should dribble 3 times with your left hand and then twice with your right hand, or any of those kinds of things. But I will be the person who's calling the plays, right?
Yeah.
So if I look at it and I say, hey, this play that we're calling all the time, it's producing chaos or not great outcomes. I reserve the right to say, okay, we're not going to run that play anymore. We're going to do something different. We're going to approach this differently, which, please understand, doesn't make you a bad basketball player. From a coaching perspective, we just need to retool.
Yeah.
Right? So I think sometimes putting things into perspective like that helps people take the medicine and not take it personally, right?
Right.
So team, patient first, team second, individual third.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I always say anytime that there's feedback or things are going on, if you're immediately feeling something personal, you're not connected to the message,
yeah.
because it is about what's happening for the patient, what's in it for them, assuming our values are in alignment, and then how are you supporting the team. Lastly, if you've got through those things and now you've got a
Mm.
personal issue, okay, fine, we can talk about that.
It's actually, it reminds me of Jim here was telling me that I think this came because they used to build a lot of rockets, and you work a lot with the rockets, but I think it came from the rockets that, and I'm going to mess the quote up, but you'll get it, is that you play for the crest on the front, not the name on the back.
Correct.
And that's an important thing on why the Rockets have been typically a fairly successful franchise. It's
Yeah.
not, but if you get traded to the next team and then you just step up and like, now I'm playing for the crest here, and even though you're my buddy, I'm going to go hard at you, right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Well, and even looking at it from that perspective, you bring up the Rockets. If you get an opportunity to meet the owners of the Rockets,
Yeah.
it totally makes sense.
Right.
And even if you got a chance to meet the parents of the owners of the Rockets, you get an even better sense.
Yeah.
Right. That to me is, that's culture bleeding through.
Well,
right?
and I think, I mean, I don't know. I know Jim and Nick, you talk about it, and Nick, who's behind the computer, talks about it, is that they billeted players, and even the players that come through the program are different once they're at the end of their playing career.
Totally.
They leave a different person, and these are kids.
Yeah.
Like they're still kids. They're 16, 17, 18, 19
But that's
kids.
part of that organization's objective. Yes, they want to win hockey games,
Yes.
but they also want to raise good human beings.
For sure.
Right? Because, I mean, those are
They move
formative
on.
years.
Yeah,
Right?
and they move on. It's not like you
Totally.
stay there. An NHL team, you might be, well, no one stays the same team for the rest of your career, but they typically
You could sell Wayne Gretzky, and then
exactly.
everybody's on that.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I actually think next time I'd love, and we've talked about this and we haven't done it yet. I'd love to chat about your relationship with the Rockets, because I know you've been their dentist for how many years now?
God, this will be my 15th year.
15th year,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's some awesome stories of kids coming in that got their teeth knocked out that we can talk about.
Yeah.
Some pucks in the face or high sticks in the face.
Yeah.
or a fist in the face.
Skate blades, you name it.
Yeah.
It's,
Maybe explore that a little bit more.
they're a different breed.
I imagine.
And they don't want to miss a shift.
No. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Love it. Well, Mark, thank you. I was glad. It was nice chatting kind of a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit, not always about teeth whitening. So it's good to kind of get people a little bit of the behind the scenes of what happens, and now we've uncovered all the secrets.
Well, some of them anyways.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thanks for coming in, and thanks
Awesome.
for
Thanks for
tuning
having
in,
me.
and we'll talk to you guys next time.
See you guys.